Now we're going to bring in our dynamic duo of Michelle Krebs and Paul Eisenstein, a couple of people that Matt and I have known for a long time, worked with. And what we're going to be talking about is EVs, electric vehicles, what's going on with them. It seems like everybody and his brother's jumping on that bandwagon. And I know this will be near and dear to Paul Eisenstein's heart, is the electrical grid infrastructure, which in Michigan, we can't seem to keep working. It just keeps going down. And I believe Paul was down for several days, but it looks like he's back up because we can see him and he must have electrical power, right, Paul?
Actually, no, I don't. I do not have power. I'm out at my cottage right now. It's the only place because not only have we been down for just about 6 days, excuse me, but my generator finally overheated and I'm hoping it'll come back again in a few hours. But right now it looks like I may have to be tossing out frozen and fresh food.
Oh my goodness.
Okay, yeah. Well, I've actually for next week's show, I've asked some people from the Michigan Public Service Commission to come on the show to discuss this because I'm getting a lot of complaints from folks. But let's, before we get into that with the fragile grid here in Michigan, let's talk about what's going on with electric vehicles. Now we have Michelle Krebs from, it's from
Cox Automotive.
Cox Automotive, right. I'm trying to remember all the names and everything. And Paul, of course, is from the Detroit Bureau. That's something he's been running since way back in the days when I was at the Free Press in the 90s. So he's been doing that for a long time. So
Yep, exactly.
Let's talk a little bit about the electric vehicles. I mean, who isn't doing electric vehicles these days? It seemed we skipped right from internal combustion briefly into hybrid and then boom, all electric.
Well, we're not at all electric yet. There are lots of plans on the table and not really very many out there, although it increases, by the week, by the month.
That's critical, isn't it? Yeah. The number of, sorry, Michelle, to cut you off. The number of new vehicles is escalating. It's almost becoming a hockey stick. You have to remember that if you exclude those really unacceptable short range models that we've had for as much as a decade, the number of long range models is growing rapidly. We've gone from just basically Tesla to having a longer range version of the Nissan Leaf, and now the Mustang Mach-E and the VW ID.4. We're going to have 2 to 4 all electric pickups within the next year or 18 months. So the key is not just the number of new models that are coming, but also the number of new segments that they're entering, so that you're not limiting yourself to just a very narrow niche, both in terms of body styles and price, but that you're getting really all over the map. And that's critical. You have to have choice. Consumers aren't going to settle for 1 or 2 electric vehicles.
I was out running errands this morning and saw my first Chevrolet Volt EUV, which I would imagine stands for electric or EUV, electric utility vehicle, right?
Right.
But I don't know what are the range on those.
Go ahead, Michelle.
I don't know that off the top of my head. I don't test drive them, but
Yeah, it's EUV, I believe, is extended utility vehicle. And it's a little bit less range than the EV, the smaller Bolt EV. I believe it's around 215 miles, maybe 20 miles range shorter than that one.
Okay, I just looked it up here on my screen. It says 247 miles battery only. That's that's getting into the point where that would take care of most people, most trips for most people, I would think. So
Michelle, right now, one of the big bugaboos is the pricing. So what do you think on pricing? Is that it has to come down, right, if you're going to reach the mass market?
Right. Well, when we survey people, which we do a lot of, there's 3 main obstacles, and price is one of them. Not everyone can afford a Tesla, and that's what's been out there. And so there isn't much real affordable right now. The other issue is range, but that's improving, but you have to pay more if you want a longer range. And of course, the EV infrastructure for charging. And that is the key to making this happen at all. And in the infrastructure package that's been gone through the Senate. There is $7.5 billion for putting EV chargers throughout the country. That's only half of what the Biden administration wanted. So, but it's a start. But we have to have that infrastructure before these ever are going to take off.
And of course, you have to have the electric grid that stays up to use those chargers. So that'll be a conversation for another time. We can't solve that one on this show. So, are there any really great innovations out there? I know that the new F-150 is all electric. I was kind of intrigued by that. I haven't actually seen it up close and personal. I have read about it. So, have either of you driven it?
I have not.
Paul, did you drive it yet?
Sorry, Mike, you dropped out for you dropped out for 1 second. Which model were you talking about?
The electric F-150.
I have been in it. I've had some time. What blew me away was how much power it has and how nicely it drives. They're quoting 0 to 60 times somewhere under 4.5 seconds. My own experience would suggest that it was probably under 4. Now that's good, but more importantly is the tow capacity for those type buyers, the cargo capacity, and all the various features that it offers. In fact, in some ways, I found it to be more stable a vehicle than the standard F-150 because, as you know, pickups tend to be very nose heavy unless you have cargo or you're towing something. When you have that big battery pack, the weight is actually more evenly distributed from front to back. And we spent a fair bit of time circling around the Ford Proving Grounds in Romeo, Michigan, including time spent hauling about a 7,500-pound trailer up hills, around corners and the like. And I just found that it actually felt more stable than a standard F-150, which I had driven on the same track just about a month or so earlier.
Matt?
Well, I was wondering too about the electric Mustang. When are we going to start seeing a lot of those on the road, and what's been the reaction?
Oh, they're out there, and they're selling everyone. Well, most of them were ordered ahead of time. I just looked at some of our data, and it was the third most shopped EV behind the Tesla Model 3 and Model Y. So it's really gaining momentum in the market.
Yeah, the big problem is a different issue. Ford just announced that they're going to have to delay deliveries for up to 6 weeks for many of them because of the semiconductor shortage. Mm-hmm. And by the way, that's one of the bigger issues that hasn't been getting a lot of attention right now. You have to remember that electric vehicles, no surprise, have a lot more chips on board than the typical IC-powered vehicle.
Sure.
So when you have a semiconductor shortage, unless manufacturers are willing to divert chips away from often very high profit vehicles like an F-150 to what are generally money losing electric vehicles for now, they're going to be hit harder by the chip shortage. There's a lot of questions about whether some of the new models coming, the Mercedes EQS, another version of the Toyota, the VW ID, the F-150 Lightning and others, whether they're going to be able to come out on time as scheduled. And I think a number of those vehicles are going to wind up being delayed unless they can resolve the chip shortage.
Of course, we're seeing a lot of vehicles delayed introduction because of the chip shortage too. So all bets are off.
The story I heard on that was when the pandemic began and everything began to grind to a halt, that the automakers canceled a lot of their chips. And then as everything began to pick up, they went in and thinking they're going to move to the head of the line. And the chip people said, no, I don't think so. We've got other people that have picked up that slack. So it's kind of they shot their own selves in the foot, right?
Well, who would know? I mean, we were in a situation that, a recession had arrived. And typically a recession, car sales go way down. This was a very unusual one, the shortest recession in history. And, people didn't have much to spend on. They didn't go on vacation. They didn't go out to eat. So they started buying cars like crazy. And of course, the car makers started incentivizing back in April. I think it's like 20% of every car sold was 0% financing. So
heck of a deal, yeah.
Yeah. And the thing is that what's continuing the problem is that the chips that automakers tend to use are older lower price, lower profit chips. So all of a sudden, hey, look how we're talking right now. Zoom. Everybody Zooms now. Everybody's got a camera or is getting one, a microphone, and all the other electronics that have just become even more popular everywhere across the world right now. They're taking the chips. They're taking more expensive chips. So if I'm Samsung or whatever company producing those chips, well, I have a choice between selling a high profit chip to some tech company or a lower profit chip to GM, and in higher volume to the to the electronic company. I'm going to go there.
Yeah. So we heard a lot during the Texas power outage over the winter of people using electric vehicles sort of as a backup power. Is that something that is a major selling point for these things? I mean, I bet it would be in a place like Michigan where we seem to lose power all the time.
Well, Ford may had a lot of publicity around all of their hybrid trucks that were used to generate power for homes in Texas during that time. So clearly was a selling point there.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was talking with Mark Royce on Facebook earlier today, and I mentioned he had a picture up of the new Cadillac Lyriq, which will be next year. And I said to him, hey, a lot of people aren't going to be happy about buying electrics right now when they know that their own power supply for their chargers is unreliable. And he pointed out the fact that they will have this two-way capability with the Lyriq and a number of the other GM models to come. So yes, that can be a plus. However, it can only supply you X number of days of power before you don't have enough battery to get around. And if you're worried that there are no chargers, no high-speed chargers nearby, I think people will be reluctant to drain their batteries and leave their car with no range in the driveway once power comes back on.
Which is another problem. A lot of people don't live in homes that have the chargers built in. They got to pay for that, or they live in apartments where unless they have public chargers right there at the apartment complex or condo or wherever they're at, where are they going to plug these things in at?
Right. I mean, I think the number is something like only 40% of American homes actually have garages. We forget, urban dwellers who might be, good candidates for EVs otherwise. They park on the street or they don't have a garage. So that's part of the charging problem.
Yeah, when my daughter lived in Chicago, that was the nightly challenge. Yeah. She would get home to her Rogers Park neighborhood and then drive around for a half hour, 45 minutes looking for a parking spot.
Right.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. We have seen a bunch of cities now begin testing the idea of making chargers available right on the street. I just did a story about this last week. Several cities, including Los Angeles and Montreal, they said that the results seem to indicate that in areas where they did have chargers available right at, say, the light poles or at meters, that the usage of electric vehicles went up sharply. And that's one of the cool things that was brought out by the latest group to do this. Interestingly enough, when you think about it, all over America, utilities and local governments have switched from using sodium vapor lights, which used a lot of power, to using LEDs. So the wiring that goes into the poles has a lot of excess capacity now that can be diverted to use for level 2 or level 3 charging.
Makes sense.
Yeah, because I know I covered a company called they're over in Muskegon. They're an LED lighting company anyway, and I'm blanking on the name of them right now, of course.
It happens as you get older, Matt, but go ahead.
I know. But they're making sodium vapor, replacements for sodium vapor lights that used 180 or 240 watts. And these things use like 30, and it's the same number of lumens. So yeah, there would be a lot of excess capacity in the wiring at the base of that street light.
All right, so let's talk about we're talking about what's going on now. Is there really consumer demand for electric vehicles? I know part of it is you got the range, you got the price, you got a lot of different things. But I mean, if all things were equal, would people be buying electric?
Well, I think we have to do two categories. We call it electrified because what we are seeing now is a big increase in hybrid buying, which is kind of a step on the way. And EV sales have gone up. You know, the president has a goal of 50% by 2030. That is a real stretch.
That's really ambitious, yes.
A lot of building blocks need to go into place and a lot more variety and affordability. And that's the affordability thing is going to be key. In the upcoming infrastructure proposal, there's a lot of debate about EV tax credits, and one put forth by Senator Stabenow has you get a $12,500 tax credit, but it has to be U.S. made by union workers. That's causing a lot of
yeah, they don't go for that down in BMW land down there, huh?
Or Toyota, Honda have
yeah,
been
right.
quite outspoken about that.
Yeah, well, you know, a lot of the electrics are being made here. And I do notice, I think this is actually a plus because we've seen a number of automakers, Volvo, for example, and Polestar, respond to the likelihood that credits will be emphasizing U.S. production. So we have seen several of them announce lately that they're going to move their EV production to, or at least some of it, to North America. Pricing is clearly coming down. If you go back, Mike, I think you and I did a video, more than a decade ago when the very first electrified vehicles came out. I'm talking plug-based.
Oh, yeah.
And back then, it cost over $1,000 a kilowatt hour for the batteries alone, never mind the pack. So you think about it, if you had had that price for today's Chevy Bolt EUV, as we talked about, with about 65 kilowatts on board, that'd be a $65,000 pack. Now, prices for the Bolt right now are at about 150. I think, Michelle, you probably can echo those numbers. Oh, about $150 per kilowatt hour. So, you know, that's an 85% drop. But GM's target is $100 when they get the Ultium battery plant going later this year. And the long-term expectations are that lithium solid state batteries coming, even 50. At $50 a kilowatt hour, all of a sudden, because gas vehicles are going to become more expensive as they have to meet tougher emissions and mileage standards. So when you get down to even $70 a kilowatt hour, suddenly you're talking about a flip-flop where electric vehicles can become less expensive than a gas vehicle.
Well, the other issues, of course, here we're in northern country where it gets cold, and we all know that electric batteries degrade in the cold, so that's a big issue. And then it's like every time you charge your cell phone, each time you do that, you're diminishing the battery, and eventually you have to replace the battery. So is that the way we're going to go? Electric vehicles, you'll be able to run it for X amount of charges, and then you got a new battery pack?
There's a lot of work being done on that to figure out how long do the batteries really last, and what is degrading. So there's a lot of work to be done in that area.
Yeah, there's been a lot of improvement on that. All the automakers now, to be honest, you have to be careful about the data that Tesla provides because it's not real straightforward. But all the data I have seen suggests that batteries are lasting a lot longer than expected in plug-based vehicles, whether the plug-in hybrids or pure battery electric vehicles. In fact, if anything, there's a very big focus on what to do with batteries when they come out of the vehicle. The vehicle itself goes back for scrap, and do you recycle or do you have second life batteries? There's a lot of folks that think that we are going to wind up with millions of very usable batteries that can be used, thank you, for backing up local areas when there's a grid problem and so on, because especially with green energy, when you're talking about, say, solar or wind, which can be unreliable or unsteady, having batteries that can help level the grid or provide energy overnight with solar will be very useful. So I think increasingly batteries are going to outlive the car.
And I think there's going to be a lot of recycling that does go on because all those minerals come from places that aren't particularly desirable. And so the more we can recycle what we have is the better. And I think there'll be a big policy emphasis in that regard.
to bring in something from today's headlines, that's one of the theories I heard about why we were in Afghanistan, is because there's a lot of rare earth minerals there. So there you go.
Not sure about that one, but certainly what I am sure about is last week the MPSC issued a RFP using all these initials for just that very thing, for regulated utilities to come up with storage of electricity in remote ways, like battery pack kind of thing. Because as you get to, for instance, I have a friend that just installed a bunch of solar panels on his roof, which is wonderful during the day. But when the sun goes down, he has no electricity. And so I was saying to him, you really need to have some kind of storage mechanism. So at least the MPSC is taking a look at that.
Yeah. Well, Tesla provided, what was it, 200 gigawatts, some crazy number of worth of batteries for, I believe it was the New South Wales government, so that they could use renewables and have a steady supply no matter what happened. Frankly, Texas could probably use it because they've had problems over the years with a bit of instability in the green part of their grid.
Yeah, Texas. Well, that's a whole nother story, right? So
yes.
They are not connected. They don't do power sharing with any other states. They're Texas, right? So, however, I think that may change after that debacle that we had. What was it, in February, when the whole thing went down? So anyway, so who is not doing electric yet, or even hybrid, that you think should be doing? I mean, as far as I can tell, most everybody's doing one or the other, right?
Everybody's doing a little bit of something. It's depending on where they are on the curve and how many. I think I read a piece yesterday. Subaru, which has been behind, is going to try to catch up. Our own Fiat Chrysler, Stellantis, was way behind. They've put out a very ambitious plan going forward. So everybody's getting on board because they have to, especially if you're going to operate in China, if you're going to operate in Europe, the biggest markets for that, you have to be electric.
Or California, which along with Washington State and Canada have set aggressive targets to eliminate everything but plug-based vehicles and eventually migrate to pure battery electric. The Japanese have traditionally been the most behind when it comes to plug-based and particularly battery electric vehicles. Toyota is just getting ready to bring out this new, what do they call it, BZ, Beyond Zero series. They're going to build one of those down in if I remember, in their new plant in Texas that they're building with Mazda. Mazda has an electric vehicle coming. Alabama? Yeah, that's right. Thank you. They have, Mazda finally has an electric vehicle, though it's a relatively short range one. Stellantis, I believe, is coming up. What did they say? Something like 20 plug-based vehicles, whether plug-in hybrids or pure battery electric, in just about 2 years. And here, by the way, here's something very interesting. Michelle, you talked about sales before, and one of the challenges really is finding the type of product that people want. Would you believe that Stellantis, through its Jeep brand, now is the biggest seller in the United States of plug-in hybrids? And of all things, it is a Jeep, the Wrangler 4xe. Now, it doesn't get a lot, about 25 to 30 miles per charge. It definitely does improve fuel economy, not hugely, but it also has advantages off-road. So they found their market. We'll see a plug-in hybrid version of every single vehicle that Jeep offers within the next 3 or 4 years. And what I find really interesting is, again, finding the niche that consumers want. So we broke a story about 2 months ago on the DetroitBureau.com, which I'm glad that they finally confirmed. You're going to see a Dodge battery electric vehicle, which will be the fastest muscle car ever built. It'll be certainly the fastest that they've done, and they expect it to be faster than the new Tesla Model.
Paul, you there?
We lost his power.
Frozen
he's back. Okay, we froze there for about 15 seconds. So, You were
All
saying?
right. So I wanted to ask the question about that is where does that leave the muscle car niche market that is so beloved of the Detroit Three? I know where I work at Lawrence Tech, we had a group of transportation design students working on that. How you would please a muscle car enthusiast with an electric vehicle because they don't make that noise that everyone seems to love and that I hear outside my house because I live close to Telegraph about 300 times a day of either a Challenger or a Mustang being floored out, going away from a red light. How will those markets be served by these vehicles? Are they going to put in fake exhaust noises or something? I mean, what are they going to do?
Some will.
Yeah, so that'll happen.
Yeah, a number of electric vehicles like the Mercedes EQS, which is basically the equivalent of the electric equivalent to the S-Class, and the Mustang Mach-E have interior noises. So you actually have sounds that you can live with if you want, or you can just shut them off and have pure silence. One of the things that Jeep is promoting about the Wagoneer is that you can basically go out into nature, go all electric, and hear birds and nature than an engine. How with it, and I love the sound of a V8 muscle car in action. On the other hand, if you give me a 0 to 60 in 1.85 seconds,
Good Lord,
which is what a couple of the manufacturers are shooting for, do I really care?
Well,
when I blow the doors
I'll be
off
too
of
busy
Mustang,
having my
even
cheeks,
a Ferrari,
I'll be too busy
I
having my
care?
cheeks pushed back to my ears, by the acceleration. Good grief.
Well, Matt wants to retire in a couple of years to Traverse City. That'd be the perfect vehicle for you, Matt, up in Traverse City, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it has to be good in the snow, though. So
yeah, good point. All right. So, well, we could talk a little bit about the infrastructure, but that's really, with consumers and DTE and MPSC. But boy, that's you got to wonder. I mean, as we move forward into electric vehicles, is the grid going to be there to support it, right?
Well, the good part is that most people are charging at night. 80 to 90% of people are charging at home or work, and the vast majority of them are charging at night. You talk to, I don't know if you've ever spent some time on the show talking with Pat Romano over at ChargePoint or some of the other folks. They'll tell you that they believe that's going to remain roughly the same. And if you charge at night, in most of the country, you're actually putting minimal strain on the existing infrastructure. There's a lot of excess energy. But the reality is, I think you're going to see more people charge during the day. Matt, you hit it before by talking about apartment dwellers and people who are driving for business or for trips. So we will need more power the more these come on board. And Michelle, what are your numbers? What are you guys seeing for end of decade?
That's not our area of expertise, but I would say too, a lot of people charge at work as well as overnight. So that'll be a key place for people to charge.
But that, of course, will be during the day, and that puts more strain on the grid.
That's my point.
Yeah, as everything gets hotter and more people use air conditioning, that puts more strain on everything. So it's like, I don't know where we're going with this. I'm a little concerned, but, well, I guess we'll have to explore that on another show. Can the grid handle all this, or do they need to do major change? Can't go back to coal, that's for sure. So then what? Do we emphasize solar and wind more? I mean, it's pretty minimal right now what they're doing in that area.
They're actually
out of my area of expertise.
Actually, if you look at the data, solar and wind are the fastest growing forms of power being implemented in the United States. They're growing fast. And the key is going to be to set up load leveling and load storage technology, whether it be off-use second life batteries from vehicles, or as happened down in Australia, where Musk just started from scratch and set up massive megawatt operations where all that green energy, whether it be from wave, wind, water, geothermal, or what have you, is stored. There's plenty of green energy. It's just going to be finding a way to make sure that it's steady and reliable.
Hey, and with us having 3,500 miles of shoreline here in the Great Lakes, I'm surprised that we don't see that tidal energy situation going on in one of the lakes as an experiment, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's
All right.
beginning to be. I think tidal will be the last.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're running down here. Instead of having Matt take you out, I'll let you both explain what you guys do, how folks can reach out to you, how they can look at your website. Go ahead, Paul, you start.
Sure. I publish thedetroitbureau.com, and we are a broad automotive magazine covering everything from consumer to industry news. And we just launched our first podcast. It's a 10-minute report on what's happened in the week, what's going to happen in the coming week, and a look back at automotive history.
All right, perfect for Instagram TV. 10 minutes is the limit there. So go ahead, Michelle.
I'm an auto analyst with Cox Automotive. We're the parent company of Kelley Blue Book and AutoTrader, consumer shopping websites. All of our data and analysis is on coxautoinc.com.
All right, Matthew, now you can take us out.
All right. Well, we want to thank both Paul and Michelle for being with us here today. Great insight, as usual, into the future of electric vehicles and the electrification of pretty much everything we do. We'll